A world in which we're not making any changes and we continue with business as usual on CO2 emissions is a very scary world. It's a world where you have extreme weather events, where we're facing water shortage, food shortage. So it's a catastrophic scenario, and we do not want that.
UN Global Compact, together with the World Resources Institute, World Wildlife Fund, CDP, and other professional organizations in this space, is working to try to get 20% of all major corporations in each major sector to commit to fully decarbonize. Because we believe once you get 20% to a quarter to a third, it then becomes unstoppable.
Companies that internalize climate action, disclose their climate-related risks in their value chain, might have a price on carbon, have active decarbonization plans in place, are more profitable and are growing faster.
Climate change is all about carbon emission. Carbon emission is all about energy, the way we consume it, the way we produce it. So we have to consume less and we have to produce it better.
Global issues cannot be done by just one single company or a single industry, nor a single countries. So we all have to come together, take the all-of-society approach to achieve it.
Greetings and welcome to this session. As debates on the COVID-19 recovery packages make headlines around the world, we are seeing many companies deliberating on plans or planning for a green recovery. Since May, more than 170 business leaders have signed a statement put forward by the UN Global Compact and our partners, urging governments to align their COVID-19 economic aid and recovery efforts with the latest climate science. These companies are calling on governments to prioritize a faster and fairer transition from a gray economy to a green economy. It makes plain business sense to do so. Besides reducing emissions and air pollution, policies and investments that incorporate climate targets will reduce vulnerability to future shocks and disasters and create good jobs. Our message is simple. We ask and support businesses to make decisions and take actions that are grounded in science. By implementing ambitious science-based targets, businesses will help set the world on a trajectory towards limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The health and sheer survival of the planet's ecosystem and its people are at stake. To accelerate corporate climate action in line with the 1.5 degree future, the UN Global Compact has launched the Business Ambition for 1.5 campaign, along with our partners in the Science-Based Targets Initiative. We invite all business leaders to commit their companies to setting science-based targets aligned with a 1.5 degree pathway in the lead up to COP26, the UN Climate Change Conference, which has now been postponed to 2021. Business Ambition for 1.5 is backed by a historic coalition comprising the UN, businesses, and NGOs, all united in the conviction that we urgently need to step up our ambition to tackling the climate crisis. To date, nearly 300 companies have made the commitment to set and implement science-based targets for emissions reductions across their value chains, consistent with keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees. The companies collectively represent nearly 9.5 million employees spanning 42 sectors with headquarters in 49 countries. Their commitment signals the scale to which the movement for a 1.5 degree pathway is growing. These companies are leading the way in creating a positive feedback loop, known as an ambition loop, in which government policies and private sector partnership reinforce each other, and together they lift climate action to the next level. We need more companies to seize these opportunities and leave polluting technologies of the past far behind. We must scale up and diversify the movement by engaging big multinationals, as well as small and medium-sized enterprises in different countries and regions across the world. The UN Global Compact is committed to making the greatest possible contribution to this effort, both at the global level and through our local networks and businesses at the national and regional levels. Allow me to move to this session where we will feature 2 climate action champions who are committed to ambitious science-based targets and securing internal business buy-in for an ambitious climate agenda. I hope that through this session, we will continue to mobilize additional climate champions within the business community and provide fantastic learning opportunities. So I'm pleased to be here today with Sylvia Langado, Sustainable Growth Officer of Natura & Co., and Jacob Boss, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Stakeholder at Ørsted. They represent 2 companies with whom the UN Global Compact has had a long-term relationship, and both companies are front-runners when it comes to ambitious corporate climate action. And I'm truly happy and pleased to say that both of your companies have recently decided to step up their commitment to the UN Global Compact and to our effort to raise the bar on climate action around the world. I'm excited to have you both in this session. Thank you very much for joining us. So I'd like to kick off with a couple of questions. And really, let me just start off by asking Sylvia first. How is your company, Natura, delivering the necessary transition to align with the 1.5-degree pathway? And what role has setting science-based targets played in accelerating that transition?
First of all, thank you, Sonda, for having us here, Natura & Co. I'm very honored to represent Aldo, and we're very honored to partner with you on this important ambition. And maybe just a few seconds on Natura & Co, because we're Brazilian-based. Not many people know us. The parent company, Natura, as you mentioned, started in Brazil 51 years ago. And from its beginning, the founders had this dream for a more conscious, just world. And actually it was the intention to amplify that vision that then we brought like-minded companies to the group. So we are Aesop, The Body Shop, and since January this year, Avon. So we're now a 4-company group, and that's how and when we named ourselves Natura & Co. when we became bigger than Natura. And I'm going to get to science-based targets. It's incredibly important for us as an accelerator, very much so. But the company was founded with this belief that nothing exists by itself, that everything is interdependent. The mission of Natura at its start is this thing that we call bem-estar bem, which is promoting not just personal well-being, and obviously that's the market we're in, but also bem-estar bem in Portuguese means being well-being and being well, is the idea that our relationships with other human beings as well as with nature should be caring, respectful, and harmonious. So we haven't always had science-based targets, but even before we started to have them, we did things like in 1983 launch refills in Latin America to a very large part of our portfolio, and we're so determined to make it work. You know, a lot of people do it, but they represent half of the sales of the products where we have them, and they reduce the carbon footprint by up to 80% versus the non-refill version. But the adoption is the thing that we fought for and worked on. On the back of the Earth Summit back in 92, the founders and the leaders of the company got to a new level of consciousness about an obligation, a desire to do something about the Amazon. And an entire business model was created to get products out of the Amazon and get wealth back in the region as a way to keep the forest standing. So that was, you know, we didn't have a target, we had a dream, an intent, and very expensive, big decisions were made. And then I think back in 2006, when decided to become carbon neutral, and then in 2007 became carbon neutral, but to become carbon neutral had to measure. So to your point about science-based targets, and then we learned a ton from measuring. And not only started to offset, but started to reduce, because you know where it is and you know where to reduce and you're passionate about the planet. But science-based targets are now fully embedded in our new commitments. So we launched in June the commitment called Commitment to Life, which is the name we gave to our goals. And there we're going full on for net zero, scope 1 to 3 in 10 years. So last year we signed the pledge to do it in 30 years. Now we're going to do it in 10 years. We committed to working with all the relevant people, your people included, and UN, on setting equivalent science-based targets for biodiversity, something that we're very passionate about. So I think where the targets exist, our commitment to life is on net zero in 10 years, protect the Amazon, stop deforestation in 25 years, get science-based targets for biodiversity, get fully circular in our packaging, get fully circular in our product, invest in regenerative solutions so that we can get to net zero, because we're not going to be able to reduce, to zero. And then we have a social pillar that, can talk another time, but also based on hard targets. So, and looking for some additional ways of measuring, in particular, wealth creation for our community of 6 million plus consultants, plus the communities in the forest. So some areas where we don't have targets, we're working to have the metric. Where we don't have metric and where we have the metrics, which are wonderful, then they work as an accelerator for us.
Thanks, Sylvia. Thanks for just laying out the sheer scope and all of the ambitions that Natura & Co has taken on. And I'll come to that in a minute, because certainly those are very big company and business shifts that you've taken on. Jacob, please share with us from Ørsted's perspective, how is your company really delivering that transition to 1.5? And tell us about science-based targets and the role that they played.
Yeah, so first of all, a couple of words about Ørsted. So we're an energy company, and just a decade ago, we were one of the most fossil fuel intensive energy companies in Europe. But we took a long-term perspective on where we saw that the world was going, and we decided a fundamental green transformation of our company. And today, we are one of the 5 largest renewable energy companies in the world. And earlier this year, we were named the most sustainable company in the world. So it has been quite a profound transformation for our company. In terms of our climate commitments, our first commitment is to become fully carbon neutral in scope 1 and 2 by 2025. And we are well on track to reach that target. Then earlier this year, we set the target for scope 3 to become carbon neutral in 2040. So 10 years ahead of the 2050 target, so to say. So our targets, we have asked the Science-Based Target Organization to assess them, to make sure that we are aligned. And we are very happy that we are aligned, because we believe that if we are to make the green transformation and to really avoid climate change, we need to measure whether we are making the necessary progress. Otherwise, it'll be a lot of sort of cheap talk and nice commitments. But we need to be sure that we're on the right track. And I think that's where the value of the science-based targets come in, because that's the only way we can make sure that we're actually on the right path to save the planet.
Thank you again, for sharing the massive transition that you've come through in these 10 years, and congratulations indeed for being named the most sustainable company. So, Jacob, you talked about what has happened in the last 10 years, and Sylvia, you mentioned the very ambitious plan around the Amazon. These are grand plans. What I'd like to know is, what does it take to achieve internal buy-in for this kind of transition? And also just share with us some practical tips, because a lot of people ask about the how. How do you build this kind of internal support and navigate the challenges that one might face around these huge business shifts?
So I think, first of all, it takes a clear vision. When we started our transformation more than a decade ago, we set the clear vision to go from being a black energy company to a green energy company. And we explained to our stakeholders internally and externally our view about how the world of energy would have to shift in order to be sort of compliant with or to arrive at a sustainable global energy system. And we were clearly wanting to be part of the future of energy. And all of our stakeholders could basically sort of see that this was the right long-term target for our company. Initially, we said that we wanted to arrive at 85% green energy in 2040. So that was a vision that was sort of sufficiently far out for people to say, yes, that's probably realistic. But then what happened afterwards, that we actually accelerated the transformation quite a bit. And today in 2020, we have arrived at 85% green energy and even more. So we've arrived at our vision back then 20 years ahead of time. And I think this is frankly one of the what you could say secrets of how we managed to get the commitment, because we weren't saying that everything has to be fundamentally different in 12 months, because that's very difficult sort of to grasp and to see how do we manage to do that. You need to set yourself on the right path, and then as you go along, you see that it's not as hard as you had imagined, and you can actually accelerate based on the successes that you are creating. We're doing exactly the same thing with our commitment to transform our supply chain, because we've said that by 2040 we want the supply chain to be carbon neutral. That's a massive transformation, and nobody frankly knows how we're going to do it. But we can sit down with our suppliers and we can say, yes, we've given ourselves 20 years. It's ambitious for sure. It's aligned with the science-based targets. And we're going to work together over this period of time to achieve this target. And I'm not promising here that we can do it faster, but I'm sure that once we get started on the journey and we get people aligned on where we're going, I think we're going to see a lot of sort of progress and hopefully also acceleration of what is actually possible. We're investing almost $5 billion US dollars a year in renewable energy. So that's quite a lot of money we're putting into our supply chain. And we're going to use that leverage to actually make sure that over time we move to our commitment.
I think so. Yeah.
I'll come back to you on the 5 billion, because I think the next question is going to be the cost benefit. But Sylvia, share with us the internal buy-in and, across that massive footprint you've spoken about. How does that work?
I think, I've been on the board of Natura, then Natura & Co. for 5 years before taking this position in February this year. And I think Jacob touched on an issue that is, but worked in other places before. And, Unilever, which is a beautiful story as well of commitment, but this leadership aspect to decide that vision is the right way to go about business, and to inspire everybody internally to put the work that's necessary, because it's hard work, is not just pretty words on the paper, is, I think, a big challenge we have. And, we can stay here hours talking about the need for visionary leadership in the world, but I think we're lucky in that, had visionary founders, had visionary leaders who back then, decided on some pretty, 50 years ago, saying we're going to be, what then became the fashionable triple bottom line thing to do. That was in the way the company was created. So I think it's an unfair question to some people in the audience, because for us it's easy. It's like it's who we are and who the founders and the leaders of the company are meant to be and recruited to be. I think what's really interesting is that we brought the Body Shop, which was also created with a mission to be better for the planet and for society. And not that Aesop and Avon weren't, but their programs were less ambitious when they came to the group. And now they're all over it. I mean, I won't be surprised if Aesop becomes net zero very soon, because they're so committed. They're so excited. So it's amazing how the same group of people, with one kind of vision or with a different kind of vision, can change the amount that they can achieve in this space. We set up this aspiration, and Jacob was talking about the importance, Natura had its own and the companies have their own missions. The Body Shop is to fight for a fairer, more beautiful world. Natura has its own on well-being and the being well thing, which is the relationship with others and with the planet. Now, as a group, we kind of worked together and said we want to be the best beauty company for the world instead of in the world. Stolen shamelessly from B Corp as that slogan. We are B Corp. We're going to be fully B Corp. We're super committed to that system. And then the commitment to life goals came from that ambition. So what is the path to becoming the best for the world? And then the commitment to life was born with its 3 pillars, with its 9 areas, with all its metrics, all science-based where we have them. So it's like Jacob. It starts from the decision to do the right thing.
And that's a really great springboard for my next question, Sylvia, because, I mean, you've explained the group of companies in Natura has very visionary leaders who, for them, this was a necessary imperative. But as you also stated, it's not always so in all companies. So in some companies, what really makes the decision is the numbers. And I think what we want to be able to do in this session is also then just really share practically, you know, in your view, what, in terms of the costs and opportunities of making this transition, you know, what were they for Natura? But also, if you could step into another company that may not have had the foresight and vision, what would you advise them about the cost-benefit analysis of these huge but very sustainable and long-term beneficial decisions?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. And I think, you know, as a leader, I just see how much easier, you know, it is to accelerate the program on a company like this versus, you know, in other places for the question that you raised. I think case studies are really powerful. I think both case studies of success and as well as understanding where the consumer is going and where the demand is going. I think, you know, in the case of Natura, I think they're investing ahead of demand based on vision. But the fact is that the brand kept growing, the company kept growing, shareholders becoming wealthier, market share grew, rolled out to Latin America, it became big, you know, it became successful. It's today the number one beauty, you know, cosmetics, CFT we call cosmetics, fragrances and toiletries in the region, ahead of all the other players that we know, other beauty companies. So I think case studies of success, because sometimes the investment was going a little bit ahead of the official ROI, but it went on belief. But I think even if it had gone a little slower, we would have made a lot of progress. And I think stories of brand health, brand growth, and profit, I think are really powerful.
And because someone surely is going to ask, is there a case study on some of these decisions, or how could we learn more about them?
Yeah, I think there's a good question. You know, I've been on the board and I've been on the group for now. Even when I go online, lots of case studies have been written. But I think part of being, you know, I think what was exciting, we're honored to be invited, but where we excited to share is we're having to share a lot internally because of the new companies coming onto the group. We're having to embed this way of working where sustainability is not a side. It's part of every conversation, part of every discussion. So I think as part of you know, being patrons or part of the initiative, we need to do a better job now to codify those learnings, because we're doing it for internal consumption as well. Because when it becomes part of the way you work, you kind of forget that there's a method, and the method is pretty impressive. So there's some case studies written, and we're going to do more in conjunction with your team for sure.
Great, thanks. And Jacob, let me ask you the same, just about the cost-benefit discussion and the, you know, the opportunities around making this transition. How did that discussion happen in Ørsted?
That's a really good question, because I think that one of the challenges we faced was obviously you cannot sit down when you make this sort of long-term decision and vision to transform and sort of do a perfect cost benefit analysis and sort of say that these are the facts and therefore we should do it. What we could see was that over time, our belief was that the energy industry would be changing towards green energy. And we were actually facing a decision to invest in a new coal-fired power plant, which would have a lifetime of maybe 40 to 50 years. And when you look into such an investment that has such a lifetime, then you have to ask yourself, is this power plant based on coal, is it going to have an easy life or a difficult life? And we had the other option on the table, which was to invest in an offshore wind farm. And we asked the same question, basically, is this offshore wind farm going to have an easy life or a difficult life? Both of them had on paper good business cases, but we decided not to build the coal-fired power plant and build the offshore wind farm instead, because we believed that it was aligned with the trends. So we've sort of been taking our business decision one at a time, and we haven't made a single business decision which wasn't a profitable business decision, but we had a firm commitment to make our business decisions in a way that would lead us in the right direction. And then you see that it starts sort of reinforcing itself, and that you start sort of building critical mass, and then you can do more, and then you can do more. And over time, your portfolio shifts to become more of the new and less of the old. And I think that's how you transform.
Great. So, incremental decisions, wise decision making as you go along, and, fantastic, change either comes by crisis or choice. I think great choices then made by Ørsted is what I hear you saying. So we have a couple of minutes left. I'd like to talk about the question of ambition loops. And really, this is where the synergies between private sector and government and public policy come to play. Sylvia, if I could kick off with you, I mean, what do you see as the biggest potential for this catalytic relationship and ambition loops between private sector and public policy?
I'm smiling because it's such a hot topic here in Brazil right now, in particular in the area that is so passionate, that we're so passionate about, which is the Amazon. Yeah. We took years to build this business model where we know it's possible to give income to those families to do something that is taking the best what the forest has to offer and great products and create wealth for them, for consumers, for us. But still we're sitting here and, our impact is, half of the size of Holland that we can protect for now. And we're going for the size of Holland that we can as a company source from and protect, but obviously that's tiny and the only way compared to the size of a forest. So we're very engaged with other major players across industries in Latin America and in Brazil to come to government with chewed up ideas that we know work and that can work, or that should be at least tried very seriously. I think that is a very practical case. We said we're going to foster collective efforts to stop deforestation by 2025. There's no way we're going to do that unless we go with a united voice and say we all want it and this is how you do it. I think another area we're super passionate about that goes beyond the Amazon is what we're going to do about carbon pricing, carbon, like with those gold standard, dollar standard we need to find. There's a lot of talk and there's a lot of intent. I think that goes well beyond our potential to have an influence that's a bit bigger here in Brazil. But I think that seriously needs as well a united front from industry and NGOs, et cetera, and working with governments. So those just to mention two areas where we have a lot of passion and there's no way we're going to do it unless it's with what you call the ambition group.
Thanks. Yeah. And Jacob, how about yourself? Private sector leadership, public policy. What is some of the great potential activities that we can unleash in this kind of partnership?
Well, I think that ambition loops have been absolutely critical for the journey that we have been on over the past decade. When we started really investing into offshore wind, it was one of the most expensive energy technologies you could see on the planet. But the fact that there were ambitious targets in place to build out this technology meant that the private sector could mobilize capital at scale and really build these large projects. And what we've seen over the past 7-8 years is that the cost of offshore wind has come down by 65 to 70%. So now it is cost competitive. It's cheaper to build electricity generation based on offshore wind than to build new coal and gas-fired power plants. So the interplay between government targets and the private sector investment in deploying the technology has been absolutely critical. And that is going to continue in still more parts of the world. And that's why it's so crucial that governments set targets, not just for carbon reduction, but also for green energy deployment, and actually make sure that it gets built, because that is what's going to attract investment. That is what is going to generate the jobs. And that is what's going to drive down the cost and make and sort of accelerate the green transformation. So ambition groups is the vital mechanism to make this work.
Great, thank you. Thank you to both of you. And sadly, we're running out of time. So I'm just going to ask you one closing question to inspire all those watching around the world. What would be your advice or your call to action to business leaders listening in, but who are not yet committed to the 1.5 pathway? What would be your call to action to them? Let me kick off with Sylvia.
I had a little bit of warning when we warmed me up. You said you're going to ask that question. I said, okay. But look, we called ourselves Natura & Co. And the and is obviously the obvious meaning, the literal meaning, but the and is meant to mean that we are committed to reconciling things that others believe are unreconcilable, short-term and long-term, the environment and the profit, and etc. And the co is because we are absolutely obsessed with collaboration, cooperation, etc., and way beyond competition, in particular in this area. So I guess my call to action is believe it's possible to do the and the call to action is we absolutely need collaboration. And for example, one big issue we have is packaging circularity. We need an entire industry with us on building the solution. So I guess please collaborate with us and with others. Leave your competition hat down sometimes.
Absolutely. Jacob, your parting short call to action, words of advice?
Yes, take the long-term view, define where you want to be, and then take one small step at a time, and little by little, big happens. That's been our recipe.
Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you from Natura & Co. and from Ørsted, Jacob and Sylvia, for sharing these really important strategic, but yet also very practical lessons on the commitments to the 1.5 pathway. I think this conversation truly gives proof that businesses have a critical role to play, but also that setting targets that are grounded in science create the necessary focus and alignment. Grateful to your ambitious leadership to recognize that we don't have to choose between climate and a strong business model. As Sylvia said, the and is truly a possibility. So thank you for all the actions you take to make your businesses future-proof. Thank you to all of you for watching. At the UN Global Compact, we look forward to continuing to work with Natura & Co. and Ørsted and any other businesses that are prepared to take this ambitious action on climate. To everyone who's joining us, I hope you'll stay with us for the next session, where we indeed have the opportunity to hear from government, from UN, from civil society, and business. Thank you so very much for joining us.
And thanks to you too, Sander. So as Sander was saying, the next session will look at accelerating global climate action for a 1.5 degrees future to recover better together. Momentum is growing in the Business Ambition for 1.5 degrees campaign, currently counting more than 290 companies. And the CEO's statement, uniting business and governments to recover better, they send strong signals from business to governments that climate ambition remains top of the agenda for the private sector. As part of a series of key milestones in the lead up to COP26, this session showcases visionary leaders, looks at ways of mainstreaming a 1.5 degrees trajectory, and explores ways for business and governments to ramp up efforts to recover better together. All right, let's cross live now to Paul Simpson, who will be moderating this session. Thank you, Paul.